Hey everybody, it's Prince of Queens. I'm going to set the record straight because I made a slight error in my video yesterday, which mainly revolved around debunking the myth that the United States economy was built around slavery, but I also included a footnote about the notion that there was this genocide of indigenous people, of Native Americans, of quote-unquote Indians, because that's how they are written in the history books. Ultimately, there was actually one recorded incident of Native Americans being deliberately, hopefully infected with smallpox blankets, but it is unknown whether or not it actually even worked. And this happened at a British fort that was employing the work of Swiss mercenaries, and the natives in the area had allied with French forces and were trying to take the fort over. This was in upstate New York. And what they did was they kept attacking even after the French decided not to attack the fort anymore. And they had stormed the fort at one point and killed patients that were in a medical ward that had smallpox, right? And they killed them and scalped them and stole some blankets and stuff. And those people had an outbreak of smallpox. So a few years later, when they kept attacking the fort, they decided to give them some smallpox blankets because they knew what happened last time. So that was the time it happened. And there was one time where some sort of other commander or something said that they might try doing such a thing, but they hadn't actually recorded it in any way. Now, I am getting this information. The most detailed information I got was from HistoryNet. I believe, historynet.com. And they give a very long and balanced perspective. I tried to actually read it out loud and I recorded myself. It went on for about 20 minutes or so. And I realized nobody would want to watch that video. So link in the description. I will have a photo of the article. So you can take a look at the beginning of it. It gives a really, really detailed description of all of the different ways that tribes people died of smallpox, how they were infected. A number of tribes actually got along fairly well with the European colonialists. The Mondans in particular had a working relationship because they were agricultural, and so the Europeans actually had to try to work with them because they taught them how to farm and everything. And they married Europeans. Like, he had a wife that was a Mondan, and then they got really, really sick with this disease, and it basically wiped them out. And then they blamed it on the guy, and they were attacking him and stuff. And it sounds like a really big shame because he did everything that he could to keep these people not to be infected. I think it was another tribe, the Lakotas, were convinced that it had to do with this guy, but he was actually seemingly innocent entirely. And other tribes, they were so desperate that when the European settlers got near them and had smallpox outbreaks and brought smallpox to the tribe, they greeted them with and asking for liquor, saying, "Give us liquor so that we can die happy," essentially. While other tribes tried to throw themselves off cliffs to prevent their tribes from dying after being infected. And this is another interesting contentious thing. That incident where supposedly they gave smallpox to the tribes people with the blankets. So it is reported that about 60 to 80 native people died around that time, but they had also kidnapped or killed about 2,000 different European colonialists and taken their stuff. So is it likely that they got the smallpox because of the blankets, or is it likely that they got it because of the, killing them thing? But the Crows, in particular, this tribe, who, now that I think about it, I sometimes bring up this guy that I used to know that's like basically a sociopath who, he's extremely racist. He's part Asian, and he's also part Crow. And he really, really hates white people. And I think that a part of that might be because he's Crow. And I just wonder, because the Crows are exceedingly convinced that all of this stuff, this disease, was deliberate. And it's just really unsubstantiated. Like, it would be like 99.7% of what we know of the transferred diseases was accidental and just had to do with weak immune systems. And then there's this like 0.3% that maybe had to do with something that was somewhat deliberate. But life was just rough back then. Life was rough. People had to struggle to survive, and they didn't really understand how to get along with each other. They didn't really understand what were the best living quarters for people. Like, one of the things, for example, that one of the reasons that they blamed European settlers for the fact that indigenous people were dying is that they were forced to live in reservations, which, yeah, that's a shame, but that happened as a long series of events due to war and disputes over territory, which was already happening at the time before the settlers came. But they were forced to live in reservations, and they ended up building square houses that were not properly ventilated, or not ventilated in the way that they were used to. Now, this was not deliberate. They just did that. They were used to living in teepees, and teepees are well ventilated, right? And from those non-well ventilated square houses, they ended up transmitting diseases like influenza and tuberculosis and other such things that actually are somewhat easily airborne. And a bunch of indigenous people died that way. And they blamed the European settlers. Oh yeah, whooping cough killed a lot of people in that way. So it was not entirely unfounded to say that, oh, if you had not put us in these areas, we wouldn't have died. But at the same time, I imagine that the European settlers thought that they were acclimating them to better housing, because, I don't know, there was probably advantages to living in wood-cut square homes that were, warmer at night and everything than a teepee. And so, yeah, it was a change in the way that these people were living, and that is a heart-wrenching tragedy. It's really a shame to look back on all of it, but to act like it was deliberate is just absurd. Like, to act like people came over from one entire continent when they didn't even know that they would be doing that. Like, imagine, like, have you ever flown across the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean? Like, have you ever flown across the Atlantic? I have. It takes a really, really long time. So imagine actually taking a ship across the ocean and then not knowing what's really going to be there. Even if there were settlers there, you're not really going to know who exactly, and like who died the summer that you made the journey. Like, you don't know who's going to be there when you get there. You don't know what language they're going to speak. And the different people from the different European nations are going to be fighting with each other. And like all these different factors, like you're going to have to deal with outbreaks of diseases yourself. You're going to have to, like, if you were a European settler, it would be this like really confusing thing. And then also you're going to be crafting this carefully planned disease genocide. It's just completely absurd to think about. It's completely absurd if you actually really read about it. But unfortunately for me, I hadn't actually read about the one detail, and I said that it was impossible. And I want to correct that, because I don't want to be one of these people that says things that are just not true without correcting myself and making a really big point to correct myself. There's people out there who say things that aren't really true, and then they correct themselves, right? And then there's people out there who say things that they think maybe are true, they get corrected, they refuse to correct themselves, and then they start lying about the people that tried to correct them. You know, like Anita Sarkeesian just lied, and then lied about lying, and then lied about lying about lying. You know, lied about everybody who was pointing out that she was lying. And I mean, that's like the worst type of person you can possibly be. So if I don't come out on the record as being somebody that admits to making mistakes and seeing the errors of my ways, what type of horrible YouTube media persona am I? And if I ever get to the point where I am just flat out lying and it's probably because of money or whatever, then maybe you can call me a sellout and roll your eyes or something. And I guess that's going to be on the record. And that's, you know, one of the reasons that I'm never going to become partisan, because I want to be a survivor in this business. You know, like when you actually are, you know, dealing with politics, which unfortunately I'm going to be dealing with politics probably for the rest of my life. You know, it's kind of like something that I thrive in, apparently. And you get to this point and you realize that it would be a lot easier if you went partisan and you get opportunities, but you got to tell these people like, hey, well, for me, and this is true, I'm not lying when I say this, I am almost pathologically honest because I'm terrified of lying, because I'm terrified of lying and getting caught. And I have been ever since I was a teenager, because I used to take a lot of psychedelic drugs. And I was on the internet a lot, and I realized there was always going to be a record of everything I said. So, hey, partisan people, they're out there. I guess they're needed in order to get things done. I understand that. You know, we would have never defeated the Democrats without the partisan Republicans. And hey, that's fine. I get that. You know, but ultimately, I guess my parting thing that I'm going to say is I'm never going to enlist as a member of your army. Think of me more as a mercenary. And remember, it's the mercenaries that win those wars for you. Because when there's a war, one side weighs how many soldiers they have and weighs how many soldiers the other side has. And they figure that they could fight because they can win. Well, it's the mercenaries who make the difference. And the mercenaries decide to fight with whoever they want to fight with. So if I stop fighting with you, there might be a reason for that. And that went for the social justice people too, because I mean, I was never a social justice devotee. I was never part of their army, but I did fight alongside with them for certain things. Then I stopped. So keep that in mind.